All right, welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Monday, August 16th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. And here are the news stories for the day, some of them anyway, from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Talk about liking to drink. A 52-year-old Billings, Montana man has been sentenced to 20 years in prison after being convicted of his 10th drunken driving charge. Wesley Couture was sentenced to 40 years in prison with 20 years suspended during a hearing last week before District Judge C.B. McNeil. Couture won't be eligible for parole until he completes a state-run alcohol treatment program. Lake County prosecutors say Couture was on parole from a 2003 DUI when a Flathead tribal officer saw his vehicle cross the center line of Old Highway 93 on September 6, 2009. Court records say Couture failed several field sobriety tests and refused a breath test. McNeil noted that this was the second time Couture was sentenced as a persistent felony offender, or a persistent drinker. The Miccosukee tribe of Florida has been ordered to disclose certain financial records for an IRS probe into the alleged misuse of tribal funds. A federal judge in Miami ruled last week that the credit card records of former chairman Billy Cypress are not protected by the tribe's sovereign immunity because the U.S. government's superior sovereign powers. The tribe attempted to assert its rights as a sovereign nation to quash the IRS summons issued in April. The summons were issued as part of an investigation into allegations that the tribe had made cash distributions of revenue to members without anyone reporting it as taxable income. While investigating, IRS agents suspected Cypress had misused tribal funds for personal and the purchase of lavish items. A number of civil rights violations have gone unreported in Indian Country because community members have not been told where to go with their complaints, a former government official said. Federal agencies should do more to make themselves known within Indian communities, said John Dulles, the former regional director for the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. For government workers, he said that means traveling, sometimes for hours, to remote reservations to meet with people. You cannot sit in a regional office or a bureau office and just sit there at your desk. You have to get out aggressively and not only tell them what their rights are, but assist them, he said. Dulles was among about 300 at a two-day conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico that focused on protecting the civil rights of American Indians. Federal prosecutors in Wisconsin believe a single organization is behind several marijuana farms that were raided by authorities in a national forest in northeast Wisconsin in recent weeks. 8 men were now under arrest and charged last week, just hours after more than 200 federal, state, and local law enforcement agents raided growing plots scattered across the Chequamegon and Nicolet National Forests. Investigators also searched a house that they said had been transformed into a marijuana processing plant, complete with a cache of guns. Court documents filed said one drug trafficking organization was overseeing the marijuana grows and employing workers on multiple sites in the forests of northern Wisconsin. The U.S. Forest Service got a tip in May from someone who claimed to have seen 2 Hispanic men preparing a grow site in the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest. Investigators eventually found 9 growing sites in that forest and other sites in the neighboring Menominee Indian Reservation. And now we're going to go to Shoshone Bannock tribal member Mark Trahant, who's going to talk a little bit about the publishing industry and how someone might be able to get a manuscript published and a few other things from Fort Hall, Idaho.
And that is Mark Trahant. You had a wonderful celebration down in your territory this weekend, the Shoshone Bannock Festival. Tell me just a little bit about that festival. And you had a book signing down there as well?
I did. The festival has been going on here at Fort Hall for every August for about 47 years. And it's just a great time to catch up with people and like any celebration in any community, powwow, rodeo, the whole works, parade. And so I thought it was a great opportunity to kind of, since we moved back here, reconnect with a lot of folks. So we set up a booth and talked to people and signed books and kind of did a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's a place to catch up on your fry bread and all those things.
Yeah.
It's an interesting to me, and I'm going to talk about that someday. It's an interesting social network throughout Indian country, all these local festivals. I suppose they could be compared to county fairs kind of a thing. How's your book doing down that way?
It's doing fine. I have a really unusual marketing plan, and individual sales are certainly important, and I want to get people connected. But my long-range strategy is really schools and places where there'll be bulk copies, and so I'm kind of thinking 2 tracks all the time.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because at News from Indian Country here, we get phone calls, once a month. Someone calls up and says, I'd like to publish a book. I'd like to publish a manuscript. I found this document that my grandfather had in the closet, and what can I do with it? And very often there's not a lot of things we can do about it. The cost.
I lost you.
Oh, you lost me?
Yeah, you're back now.
Oh, okay.
Must be a funny internet today.
It could be that some of the digits just got off track, the beaten path.
Right.
But my question was about, we get asked very often about publishing books here. People find manuscripts from their grandparents in their closet, those kinds of things. What's your, the ability to publish books is getting easier and easier all the time. What are you finding about it in terms of forums, a hard copy versus online? Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. I think we're still a hard copy is still the primary focus, at least for Indian country. I've probably sold no more than 20 copies on electronic editions, and I'm probably just over 2,200 in actual book sales. So you can see kind of the discrepancy. That said, I think the opportunity for publishing is amazing. And I'll give you an example. In 3 weeks, I will finish my series on healthcare reporting, and I'll have some 68 or so columns. What I'm probably going to do is bundle all those together, do a very quick edit, nothing sophisticated, and put them in book form. I may sell 100 copies, but the costs involved are virtually nothing, so those 100 copies are all worth doing. They're also great for researchers who might be interested, who want the actual, what did you write for this series? So I think that's an example of the potential with books on demand.
And that's the difference, isn't it? Because it used to be that in order to achieve a decent price, you had to have a run of like 10 or 20 or 30,000, or you had to have some agency pick you up. Now, shopping around for someone to publish, did you have to do that in a typical fashion this time?
I did. I looked at a lot of publishers and on-demand publishers, and I found one that had a combination of real print and on-demand, because we started with 2,500 real copies. But the cost of on-demand, I mean, we're talking in the range of $4 to $8, and that makes it so you can keep the book very affordable, which I wanted to do, and it's just changed the whole dimensions of the game.
Does it allow you to fix the book if you find a typo or a problem or an issue with something that you've put in the book? Can you fix it on a regular basis?
On a regular basis. You have to pay each time. You have to pay the setup charges again. And with The Last Great Battle, I actually went to pretty great lengths to make it more like a normal publication. I had an editor, a copy editor, a designer, so it went through lots of stages. I probably wouldn't do that for every book. And if you're certainly finding a family manuscript, you wouldn't need to do that.
Right. So this series, is that going to be something that, again, would be highly controlled by you? Are you looking for a publisher for hard copy, or are you just going to do this on-demand idea?
I'll do it on demand, and you can do on demand with hard copy too. For example, we're going to do a hard copy version of The Last Great Battle primarily for libraries. It'll be about $21, and that'll all be print on demand. So when a library orders it, they'll get a copy.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And overall, part of the problem of publishing used to be that you used to need not only a 10,000 hard copy run, you needed to be able to afford that.
Right.
How do we gauge how much money it would cost? If I had a 100-page manuscript that my grandfather left in the closet that's beautiful, What would you do with it to get published? Where would you go? Do you go online? Do you begin talking to people? Where do you go?
Yeah, I'd go online. I'd start looking at the on-demand publishers, and now there's several of them. CreateSpace is just one, for example, that's owned by Amazon. And so what's really nice is they automatically link to Amazon. So you have an automatic place to sell your book. I have one that allows me to use both Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Powell's. What's really interesting is because we've given away a few copies at public events, people have then sold those copies into the used book market. And my book actually costs more used than it does new.
And if it has a signature on it that's been signed by you, does that bring value or is that degrading it?
That's a good question. I haven't seen that on the charts yet.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what the book's about, just in case someone missed it.
It's about the shift from termination to self-determination, and it really focuses on the work of Forrest Gerard, a Blackfeet, and one of the first Native Americans in the Congress as a staff person.
Quite a bit about Scoop Jackson in there as well.
Quite about Scoop Jackson. The interesting thing about him is his complete switch on Indian issues. He was an avowed terminationist and then became the champion of self-determination.
Good, good. What else is on your agenda here coming up in the next couple of weeks? Can we check in and talk to you about something else?
Sure. I have 3 more weeks left as a media fellow with the Kaiser Family Foundation, and so I'm kind of wrapping up my last columns. Today's column is on the growing role of the private network within the Indian health system. And the next 2 will probably focus on kind of recommendations I'd like to make.
Are there Native Americans involved in that private network?
Absolutely. For example, a company in South Dakota this week hired Dr. Donald Warren away from the Aberdeen Tribal Chairmen's Association Health Board to run their Native American programs. So private companies are starting to realize that Indian country is a good market, and you can actually compete with the Indian Health Service.
Oh, that's interesting. Would you recommend that people in healthcare look at the private sector as potential in the future then?
Absolutely. The one that I think is pretty great, and if I'm not a health kind of person in terms of as an investor, but I think an opportunity is there's a number between 133% of federal poverty level and 300% of federal poverty level. And it's up to people who make $70,000 a year, which is, when you think of Indian country, a pretty large number. That group now can get some subsidies, and a private company could insure them at a profit very easily, I think, and then use the Indian health system as the way to deliver the service.
That'd be interesting. Always interesting talking to you, Mark. You take care, and we'll touch base with you again soon.
Sounds good, Paul. Thanks.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country. On this edition of the Native News Update, we want to say miigwech for showing up. Come back again soon.